The Solomon Island ground boa is quickly becoming a very popular pet snake, and it's not very difficult to see why. Now, with these snakes becoming so popular, I thought it was high time that we get a care guide here on YouTube. So, without any further ado, let's get into how to care for these absolutely wonderful boas. So, the Solomon Island ground boa is a smaller species of boa, which is definitely important to know because the first thing you're going to want to know about these snakes is how big they get and how big of an enclosure you're going to need. Getting on average 3 to 5 feet, the Solomon Island ground boa stays a little bit smaller than a ball python. Some females might get about the same size as adult female ball pythons, but that's not super common. However, they are still semi-arboreal despite the name ground boa, so you definitely want to be giving them just as much space to climb as you are giving them space to crawl around on the floor of their enclosures. With all of that being said, I typically recommend a 3x2x2 or a 4x2x2 for your adult Solomon Island ground boas. Now, babies being rather finicky eaters when they're first born neonates, you might want to keep them in something smaller than this even, despite the fact that I do fully believe that in most cases bigger is better when it comes to your pet snakes. These babies might take a little bit of time getting eating, and for that reason you might want to keep them in a smaller enclosure where they don't feel as exposed. But for sure, a 3 to 4 foot PVC enclosure would be a wonderful setup for these beautiful snakes. And of course, being semi-arboreal, if you want to do something like a 4x2x4, you definitely can do that as well. Right now I keep my smaller Solomon Island ground boa in this enclosure right here, which is a 2x2x1. I do want to give her more height, so definitely in the future I'm working on building a big wall of bioactive enclosures in what is going to be the new film studio, and I want to definitely give her more height so that she can have the space to climb around if she wants to. But for now, I just have some pieces of cork that are sitting up in ways that she can climb around on them, get up high if she wants, without those cork pieces falling over, because ideally if you're giving these bigger branches and perches for your snake to climb on, you want them to be anchored to something. But with this PVC being so thin, it's very difficult to do that, so I'm just waiting until I get her in a 4x2x2 PVC enclosure to really mount some big branches for her to climb on. It is also important in this enclosure that you give them a nice big water bowl, because my ground boas do like to soak a lot. They do not have mites, they just are a species of snake that seems to really like water. So definitely give them a bigger water bowl that allows them to soak when need be. Moving on to our next category, we were talking about heat and humidity. Both of these are very important for reptiles, of course, being cold-blooded animals, and these guys coming from the Solomon Islands definitely need higher levels of humidity. But I don't like it as hot as a ball python. I wouldn't recommend getting your basking spot much hotter than 86 degrees, if any hotter than that at all. And I like to keep the warm side about 80 to 82 degrees, with that hot spot being right at 86, sometimes a little bit lower into the 84, 85 degree territory. And then I like to keep the cool side in the upper 70s, just to give a nice gradient where that snake can definitely go and cool off if it feels like it needs to. And then as for their humidity, again, these snakes being from the Solomon Islands, they do require a little bit higher humidity levels than say your more arid species like corn snakes. I typically recommend keeping your ground boa somewhere between 65 and 80% humidity, and that seems to give me the best success with my specific snakes. A good rule of thumb always is if your snake is shedding completely in one piece, they're eating, and they are not showing any signs of upper respiratory infections, then you're probably pretty good on the humidity. And for substrate, since these snakes do require higher humidity, I definitely do not recommend something like aspen shavings, because aspen shavings are very dry and they get moldy really quick if they're in a very humid environment. I personally like to have a mixture in my ground boa enclosures of EcoEarth and Cocoa Blocks, because that seems to get me the best level of humidity that I need without being too wet all the time that it's going to cause issues like scale rot, but giving enough humidity where the snake can comfortably sit on top of the substrate without being in permanently wet substrate all the time. It is also not a terrible idea to give them a humid hide, and a humid hide simply is a hide made out of maybe a deli cup or one of those Zoo-Med rock dens that has a lid over the little like tray of a hide. If you get one of those, put some sphagnum moss in that and wet it down every now and then. Keep it closed. That works as a very good humid hide, so if your snakes do need extra humidity, they can go in there. Especially during shedding, it is important that they have places where they can get really humid so that they can shed completely and not have any issues with getting that shed stuck. Now, for the temperament of the Solomon Island ground boa, these snakes tend to be about 50-50. Some of them can be very, very well behaved and very good handling snakes, whereas some others might not be super well behaved and might be pretty defensive. In the wild, Solomon Island ground boas are typically lizard eaters, which is why, again, it's important not to get a wild-caught individual, because they may only want lizards and may never transition onto frozen thawed rodents. But if you're getting a captive bred and born ground boa, make sure you do your research on breeders, because some people might try and sell a Solomon Island ground boa as a captive bred and born baby, when in actuality it's wild-caught. So definitely do your research on these breeders to make sure you're not getting scammed and being sent a wild-caught animal that will not eat anything but lizards. Whereas these more responsible breeders are going to do everything in their power to get them on frozen thawed rodents for you before they send you your Solomon Island ground boa. I haven't seen any Solomon Island ground boas that need anything bigger than maybe a large mouse or a small rat for exceptionally large females, so you don't have to worry about it breaking the bank like some giant yellow worm down there does a lot. Now, where should you get your Solomon Island ground boa? As we said before, it is not a good idea to get a wild-caught imported Solomon Island ground boa because they'll have issues with parasites, they might have injuries, and they might not eat for you. Because I've also heard from a lot of breeders that these guys don't always acclimate very well to captivity. So definitely get a captive bred and born baby. You're not going to find these guys in pet stores anytime soon, so your best bet is either a reptile show or morph market. So overall, Solomon Island ground boas, I would say, are an intermediate level snake to keep. They require a little bit higher humidity with lower temperatures, so they're not as hot as a ball python. And if you're getting a wild-caught individual, which again I cannot stress against enough in this video, you might have some big issues getting them feeding. But I believe that these snakes are definitely more of an intermediate species and shouldn't be too difficult for most reptile keepers. Alrighty, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope that it helped you decide whether or not a Solomon Island ground boa is the right pet snake for you, and showed you how better to care for these absolutely incredible pet boas. Again, I fully believe that over the next few years we're going to see a big influx in people wanting these snakes because they are just fantastic snakes. They're so variable. You can get red ones, you can get black ones, you can get white ones. And it's just incredible to see all the different color variations out there. As always, you are watching Repti-verse. Down in the description below you'll find a link to my Patreon page and a link to go support US ARC. If we get 25 patron members, we're going to be doing a Midwest Tongs giveaway. So definitely follow the Patreon for as little as $1 a month if you want a chance to win that giveaway. Definitely go down and follow US ARC because they're fighting for our rights as reptile keepers to keep these animals that we so love and cherish. And I think that's about everything I have to plug today. So definitely like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe, turn on notifications so you never miss a video, which all come out on Fridays, and I will see you guys next week. Peace out, YouTube.